An 8-ton apex predator with a jaw capable of crushing a car does not give live birth. The very concept of a pregnant Tyrannosaurus rex forces us to rethink everything we know about the undisputed king of the dinosaurs. Mammals give live birth. Large theropods did not. A female T-Rex laid eggs, and that simple biological reality created one of the most dangerous and extreme life cycles in the history of our planet. The journey from an egg to an 8-ton adult was a gauntlet of survival where the odds were overwhelmingly stacked against the animal. We're talking about an environment where the vast majority of offspring were quite literally eaten before their first birthday. Before the first egg was even laid, the biological toll on the mother would have been massive. Growing up to 24 eggs requires an enormous amount of calcium. The T-Rex solved this using a mechanism we still see in modern birds today. It is called medullary bone. In 2005, paleontologists studying a T-Rex fossil known as B. rex made a landmark discovery. Inside the thigh bone, they found specialized spongy bone tissue. This is a temporary calcium reservoir. A female T-Rex literally dissolved parts of her own skeleton to build the eggshells for her offspring. She sacrificed her own structural integrity to ensure her babies had a protective casing. But there is a hard physical limit to how big a dinosaur egg can get. You might imagine an 8-ton predator laying an egg the size of a boulder, but the laws of physics simply do not allow it. An egg breathes. Oxygen has to pass through microscopic pores in the shell to reach the embryo, and carbon dioxide has to escape. If an egg gets too large, the shell has to become thicker to support the weight of the fluid inside. If the shell is too thick, oxygen cannot penetrate it, and the embryo would suffocate. Therefore, even the largest dinosaurs on Earth were restricted by the geometry of gas exchange. A T-Rex egg was likely no larger than a modern ostrich egg, or perhaps an elongated football. This means that a female T-Rex standing 20 feet tall and measuring 40 feet long laid a clutch of relatively tiny eggs. We do not have definitive T-Rex nests perfectly preserved, but based on closely related theropods, a clutch likely contained between 15 and 30 eggs. An 8-ton animal sitting on a pile of football-sized eggs would instantly crush them. Instead, she likely buried them in rotting vegetation or loose soil, similar to how modern crocodilians build their nests. The decomposing plant matter acted as a natural incubator, generating heat to keep the eggs at the precise temperature required for embryonic development. The environment itself was just as deadly as the predators. The Hell Creek ecosystem was a coastal floodplain, featuring vast river systems and subtropical forests. Sudden seasonal flooding was incredibly common. Paleontologists frequently find massive bone beds of dinosaurs that were wiped out by sudden, violent flash floods. The nest buried in soil was sitting precisely in the danger zone. Before a single baby T-Rex even had the chance to break out of its shell, there was a very real possibility that the entire clutch could be drowned by rising waters. During this incubation period, the nest was incredibly vulnerable. The Hell Creek ecosystem of 66 million years ago was crawling with opportunistic scavengers. Small dromaeosaurs like Acroraptor, massive snakes, and giant mammals like Didelphodon would have eagerly raided a T-Rex's nest. It is highly probable that the mother stood guard. The T-Rex snout was packed with trigeminal nerve endings, making it as sensitive as a human fingertip. This terrifying predator could have gently manipulated eggs or dug through soil without damaging her unborn offspring. When the eggs finally hatched, the creatures that emerged looked nothing like the monsters in popular culture. To break out of the thick shell, the hatchlings likely used an egg tooth, a temporary hardened bump on their snout designed purely for this escape, much like modern crocodiles and birds use today. A newborn T-Rex was tiny. It likely weighed around 3 to 5 pounds and measured roughly 3 feet from nose to tail. It was basically the size of a skinny turkey, and evidence from primitive tyrannosauroids suggests these hatchlings were probably covered in a thick coat of downy feathers for insulation. They had disproportionately long legs, massive eyes, and a very fragile skeletal structure. The moment they crawled out of the dirt, the countdown would have started. The infant mortality rate for a T-Rex is estimated to be incredibly high. Paleontologists look at the demographic curves of tyrannosaur populations, and there is a massive gap in the fossil record for very young individuals. Some of this is due to preservation bias, as tiny bones dissolve easily in acidic soil, but the ecological reality is that most baby T-Rexes simply did not survive. They were at the bottom of the food chain in a world filled with apex killers. A baby T-Rex could not rely on its mother for long. While modern crocodilians offer protection for a few months, at some point, the juvenile T-Rex would have been on its own, and the threats were everywhere. Dakotaraptors, massive flying pterosaurs like Quetzalcoatlus with wingspans the size of small planes, and giant ancient crocodiles like Borealisuchus were all perfectly capable of swallowing a T-Rex baby whole. Even worse, the greatest threat to a young T-Rex was very likely another T-Rex. Cannibalism is well documented in tyrannosaurs. Fossilized skulls of Dipletosaurus, a close cousin of the T-Rex, show distinct bite marks from other Tyrannosaurus. If a starving adult T-Rex encountered an unprotected juvenile, it would not hesitate to eat it. To survive this nightmare, a young T-Rex had to rely on a completely different set of survival skills than the adults. Adult T-Rexes were built for ambush and brute force. They were heavy, heavily muscled, and designed to crash through bone. Juveniles were built for speed. Their lower leg bones were highly elongated, a classic adaptation for fast running. A 1-year-old T-Rex was a pursuit predator. It chased down lizards, small mammals, and insects. It did not have the bite force to crush bone. Instead, its jaws were lined with thin, blade-like teeth perfectly evolved for slicing through flesh. This dramatic difference in body types between juveniles and adults actually solved an ecological problem. In most ecosystems, you have small predators, medium predators, and large predators. But in the Hell Creek Formation, there is a strange lack of medium-sized carnivore fossils. Paleontologists now believe that the T-Rex simply dominated all of those niches. The juveniles were the small predators, the teenagers were the medium-sized predators, the adults were the apex predators. As they grew, they shifted their diet, their hunting style, and their habitat. They essentially became entirely different animals at different stages of their lives. The transformation was so extreme that for decades, scientists were completely fooled by it. Paleontologists kept finding fossils of sleek, medium-sized tyrannosaur with a narrow snout and blade-like teeth. They named it Nanotyrannus, believing it was a separate dwarf species that lived alongside the T-Rex. The most famous specimen, known as Jane, sparked intense debate. But modern bone histology, the microscopic analysis of the fossils, revealed the truth. Jane was not a dwarf species. She was simply a teenage T-Rex. The structural differences between a teenager and an adult were so radical that they literally looked like entirely different branches of the evolutionary tree. The growth curve of a T-Rex is one of the most extreme in the animal kingdom. Paleontologists can determine the age of a dinosaur by cutting its bones and counting the lines of arrested growth, much like counting the rings on a tree. This bone histology reveals a fascinating life cycle. For the first 10 to 12 years of its life, a T-Rex grew at a relatively slow and steady pace. If it survived the gauntlet of childhood, a 10-year-old T-Rex might weigh around 1,000 pounds. It was sleek, extremely fast, and highly dangerous to mid-sized prey. But then, at around age 14, something biological triggered a massive growth spurt. The T-Rex entered its teenage years and essentially exploded in size. During a 4 to 5 year window, a teenage T-Rex packed on an estimated 4.6 pounds of mass every single day. It was adding over 1,500 pounds to its frame every year. This required an astronomical amount of food. A teenage T-Rex had to be a relentless hunting machine just to fuel its own metabolic expansion. To maintain this incredible rate of growth, their metabolism had to be running completely differently from modern reptiles. We often think of reptiles as cold-blooded, slow-moving animals that rely on the sun for heat. But the T-Rex was almost certainly mesothermic, or even fully warm-blooded. It had an internal biological furnace constantly burning to support its rapid development and highly active lifestyle. The fluffy feathers covering the young tyrannosaurs acted as critical insulation to trap this internal body heat, preventing them from freezing during cold nights in the Hell Creek ecosystem. During this growth spurt, its entire anatomy transformed. The skull widened out into the iconic boxy shape. The snout deepened. The eyes shifted forward, granting extreme binocular vision for depth perception. The long, blade-like teeth fell out and were replaced by thick, serrated railroad spikes designed to withstand the impact of hitting solid bone. The jaw muscles expanded to the point where they could generate over 8,000 pounds of bite force. We know exactly what this bite could do, because paleontologists have found fossilized T-Rex feces, called coprolites. They were packed with shattered bone fragments. The sleek runner morphed into an armored tank destroyer that literally ate its prey, bones and all. This phase of its life was incredibly violent. The fossil record is filled with teenage and subadult tyrannosaurs that show massive injuries, broken ribs, shattered legs, and deep bite marks across their skulls. When you're growing that fast, you have to take down larger and more dangerous prey. You have to start hunting Edmontosaurus, a massive duck-billed dinosaur that could easily crush a predator with a swift kick. You have to start facing off against the Triceratops, an animal quite literally built to impale attackers. The shift from hunting small game to hunting heavily armored mega herbivores came with a steep learning curve, and many teenage T-Rexes did not survive it. This transition from a fast, sleek runner to a bone-crushing adult also meant a change in the hunting dynamic. An adult T-Rex was too heavy to chase down fast prey over long distances. It had to rely on its incredibly complex sensory organs. CT scans of T-Rex brain cells revealed enormous olfactory bulbs. Its sense of smell was arguably the best of any terrestrial animal in Earth's history. It could likely detect the scent of a carcass or a herd of prey from miles away. It combined this with highly developed inner ear canals adapted for hearing low-frequency sounds, allowing it to feel the footsteps of distant prey vibrating through the earth. By the time a T-Rex reached age 20, it had achieved its full adult size of around 8 tons. But reaching adulthood did not guarantee a long life. The oldest known T-Rex fossil, a specimen named Sue, was only 28 years old when she died. Her skeleton is a roadmap of pain and survival. She had a torn tendon in her right arm, damaged ribs, an infection in her jaw, and a fibula that had been completely broken and healed over. The holes in her jaw were likely caused by a microscopic parasite called trichomonas, an infection that modern birds still get from fighting and eating each other. The life of an apex predator was brutal, short, and relentlessly violent. Out of a clutch of 20 eggs, perhaps 1 or 2 might survive their first year. Out of those, maybe 1 would navigate the dangerous teenage years without being killed by a triceratops or a rival T-Rex. The constraints of oxygen diffusion in an eggshell meant that the king could never be born a king. It had to earn its crown by surviving one of the most brutal biological gauntlets in Earth's history. This was a tiny, feathered target that managed to outrun, outgrow, and outbite every single threat in its environment just to claim a few brief years at the top of the food chain. And hey, I'll catch you next time.